The human ship Aurora moved slowly through space toward the massive station that hung in the darkness like a glowing city. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the alien structure grow larger on the main screen. This was humanity's third try at joining the Galactic Council, and Jake knew it might be their last chance. "Captain, we're getting docking instructions," said Lieutenant Ben Carter from his position at the communications console. The young officer looked nervous, just like everyone else on the ship. They all knew how important this mission was. Jake nodded and turned to look at his small team. Dr. Lisa Parker sat nearby, going over her research files one more time. She was a smart woman who had spent years studying the strange signals they had found at the edge of space. Next to her stood Colonel Matt Hughes, a tough military man who never smiled much but always got the job done. "Remember what we came here to do," Jake said to his team. "We're not just asking to join their club anymore. We have something important to tell them, something that could save millions of lives." The Aurora docked with the station an hour later. Jake and his team walked through the airlock into a world unlike anything humans had ever built. The walls curved and twisted in impossible ways, and strange lights moved through the air like living things. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors, some walking, some floating, some crawling on multiple legs. A tall, blue-skinned creature with forearms approached them. "I am Guide Velnoth," it said in perfect English. "The Council is ready to see you, but I must warn you that they are not in a good mood today." Jake and his team followed the guide through winding hallways filled with the sounds and smells of 100 different worlds. They passed gardens where purple trees grew upside down and pools of liquid that glowed with their own light. Finally, they reached a massive chamber with a dome-shaped ceiling that showed the stars outside. The Galactic Council sat in a circle round the center of the room. Jake had studied all of their species before coming here, but seeing them in person was still overwhelming. The Zalani looked like tall, proud elves with silver skin and glowing eyes. The Etherians were ancient beings made of pure energy, who spoke in voices like singing crystals. The Sorans were reptile-like creatures with sharp teeth and cold, calculating eyes. The Hive Queen of the insect-like Kithara sat surrounded by her worker drones. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zalani spoke first. His voice was smooth but filled with contempt. "So the humans come to us again, begging for a place among civilized beings. Tell us, Captain Morrison, what makes you think we should waste our time listening to you after rejecting you twice already?" Jake stepped forward, keeping his voice calm and respectful. "Honored council members, we're not here just to ask for membership anymore. We've discovered something that threatens every living being in this galaxy, and we need your help to stop it." Several council members laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Counselor Primdex of the Etherians spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "The young species always think they have found some great danger. You have been in space for less than 400 years. We have been watching the stars for millions of years. What could you possibly know that we do not?" Dr. Parker stepped forward, holding a small device that projected images into the air above them. "We call them the Void Spawn," she said, her voice steady despite the Council's obvious disbelief. "They're creatures made of dark energy that feed on stars and living beings. Our deep space sensors have detected them moving toward our galaxy. From the empty space between galaxies, the holographic images showed vast, shadowy forms drifting through the darkness of space. Like living nightmares, they moved past dead solar systems where the stars had been drained of all their light and energy." Commander Thexgol of the Sorans hissed with laughter. "Your primitive scanning equipment shows you shadows in space, and you think they are monsters coming to eat us all. How amusing. Our calculations show they will reach the outer colonies in 50 years, Dr. Parker continued, ignoring the mockery. "They consume everything, stars, planets, entire civilizations. Nothing we've seen can stop them except weapons designed specifically to fight dark energy entities." The Hive Queen Zixnath clicked her mandibles together, which was how her species showed amusement. "The humans create fantasies to make themselves seem important. They want us to fear imaginary demons, so we will welcome them as our protectors." Colonel Hughes stepped forward. his face hard with controlled anger. We've prepared detailed defense plans and weapon designs based on our research. We're willing to share everything with you. No strings attached. All we ask is that you take this threat seriously. Ambassador Kethvar waved a dismissive hand. We have heard enough of this nonsense. The answer is the same as before. Humanity is too young, too aggressive, and too paranoid to join civilized galactic society. Your species sees enemies everywhere because war is all you understand. Jake felt his patience slipping away, but he kept his voice level. We're not asking you to make us members of your council. We're asking you to prepare for a threat that could destroy everything you've built. Look at our data. Study our research. If we're wrong, you lose nothing. If we're right, you save trillions of lives. The council members whispered among themselves, in their various languages. Finally, Councillor Primdex spoke again. Very well. Leave your data with us. We will examine it when we have time, though I suspect we will find nothing but the fearful imaginings of a primitive species. Dr. Parker uploaded all of their research to the station's computers, including detailed sensor readings, mathematical models, and proposed defense strategies. Years of humanity's best work, given freely to beings who treated them like children. As they prepared to leave, Jake turned back to address the council one final time. I hope you're right to dismiss our warnings. I hope the void spawn are just shadows and bad data. But if they're real, if they come for you like we believe they will, remember that we tried to warn you. Remember that we offered to help. The council members were already talking among themselves, ignoring the humans completely. Jake and his team walked back through the twisting corridors of the station, past the impossible gardens and floating lights, back to their simple human ship. As the Aurora pulled away from the station, Jake stood on the bridge watching the alien city shrink in the distance. Lieutenant Carter approached him with a worried expression. Captain, do you think they'll listen to our warning? Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. No, Ben, I don't think they will. They've lived in peace for so long. They've forgotten that the universe can be dangerous. They see us as primitive warmongers because we still remember what it means to fight for survival. So what do we do now? Jake turned away from the screen and headed for his quarters. We go home and get ready. If the void spawn are coming, humanity will face them alone. We've been taking care of ourselves for thousands of years. I guess we can do it for a few thousand more. Behind them, the Galactic Council station continued its slow orbit around the distant star, its inhabitants already forgetting about the paranoid humans and their imaginary monsters from the dark between the stars. 20 years had passed since Captain Jake Morrison returned from the Galactic Council. With news of their rejection, Earth had changed in ways that would have shocked the aliens who dismissed humanity's warnings. The blue skies that once welcomed visitors from space were now filled with massive metal structures that blocked out the sun in many places. President Carol Bennett stood in the underground command center. Beneath what used to be Washington, D.C., the old city existed only in pictures. Now, in its place rose a fortress of steel and concrete that could survive almost anything the universe might throw at it. She watched the reports coming in from human colonies across known space, and every report said the same thing. Humanity was ready for war. Dr. Cross is here to see you. Madam President, said her aide, a young woman named Nancy Walsh who had never seen the surface world in daylight. Dr. Alan Cross entered the room carrying a tablet full of data. He was older now, with gray hair and tired eyes, but his mind was still sharp. For 20 years, he had led the Terran Defense Initiative, turning humanity's fear into the most advanced weapons the galaxy had ever seen. The new orbital platforms are online, he reported, sitting down across from the president. We now have 50 defense stations around Earth, each one capable of destroying a ship the size of a small moon. The dark matter collectors are working perfectly, and we're storing enough energy to power our weapons for years. President Bennett nodded, but her expression remained serious. What about the Soul Weapons Project? Dr. Cross smiled for the first time in months. That's the good news. We've figured out how to make weapons that the void spawn can't absorb or deflect. The secret is in human consciousness itself. Our brains produce a type of neural energy that can be infused into dark matter. Particles, when we fire these weapons, they carry part of our human spirit with them, and regular weapons won't work against them. Not at all. Energy beams pass right through them. Missiles and bullets just get absorbed and make them stronger. But these soul weapons, they can actually hurt the void spawn because they contain something the creatures have never encountered before: human determination and willpower. President Bennett walked to a large window that showed the construction happening far below. Thousands of workers in protective suits were building more underground cities, moving humanity's entire civilization away from the surface where it might be vulnerable to attack. The aliens still think we're paranoid warmongers, she said quietly. They see our military buildup and use it as proof that we don't deserve to join their peaceful society. Dr. Cross joined her at the window. Let them think what they want. When the void spawn come, they'll understand why we prepared. The question is whether any of them will still be alive to thank us. Far above them, General Sophie Reed walked through the command deck of humanity's newest ship, the Defender. The massive vessel was 3 times larger than anything humans had built before, bristling with weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Captain Lucy Stone, the ship's commander, stood beside a holographic display showing the positions of Earth's defense fleet. 5,000 ships, Captain Stone said with pride, every one of them equipped with quantum armor and dark energy disruptors. The aliens have larger fleets, but they've never had to fight anything that could actually threaten them. General Reed studied the display carefully. Each dot of light represented a human warship and the lives of the people aboard it. These men and women had volunteered to defend not just Earth, but the entire galaxy, even though that galaxy had rejected them. Any word from our deep space sensors? She asked. Nothing yet. But Dr. Parker's team says we should start detecting the first signs within 10 years. The void spawn moves slowly, but they're definitely coming. On the bridge of a small patrol ship near the outer edge of human space, Commander Ryan Bell received the weekly message from Earth Command. All human colonies were to maintain complete communication silence starting immediately. No radio signals, no ship transmissions, nothing that might attract the attention of the approaching threat. The order meant that human worlds would be cut off from each other for the first time since humanity reached the stars. Families would be separated, trade would stop, and the growing human civilization would fragment into isolated pockets of resistance. It was a terrible price to pay, but it might be the only way to survive what was coming. Back on Earth, Dr. Cross worked late into the night in his laboratory, surrounded by machines that hummed with dark energy. His latest experiment involved creating ammunition that could be fired from conventional weapons, but carried the neural patterns of human consciousness. Each bullet would be like a small piece of human soul, deadly to creatures that fed on pure energy. The targeting system is the real breakthrough, he explained to his assistant, Dr. Helen Nash, a brilliant woman who had given up a comfortable life to work in the underground research facilities. The void spawn exist partially outside normal space and time. Our computers can't track them, but human intuition can. The weapons system reads the gunner's brainwaves and fires where the human thinks the target will be, not where the sensors say it is. Dr. Nash looked at the test results with amazement. So we're literally fighting them with human instinct. Exactly. Every other species in the galaxy relies on technology and logic, but humans have something they don't: the ability to make intuitive leaps, to see patterns that don't exist in pure data, to fight with emotion and creativity instead of just following programmed responses. Meanwhile, on the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Kethva was giving a speech to representatives from dozens of worlds. The subject was humanity's recent isolation and what it meant for galactic security. The humans have stopped all communication with the outside galaxy, he announced to the assembled delegates. Their ships attack any vessel that approaches their territory. This proves what we have always known: they are a dangerous, paranoid species that sees enemies everywhere. The other delegates nodded in agreement. Several voiced concerns that humanity might be planning some kind of aggressive expansion, using their isolation to hide military preparations. None of them suspected the truth. that humanity was preparing to defend them all from a threat they refused to believe existed. Counselor Prindex spoke in his crystal voice. Perhaps it is for the best. A species so focused on war and conflict has no place among civilized beings. Let them hide in their little corner of space. The galaxy is better off without them. The council members laughed and returned to discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges, completely unaware that their dismissal of humanity might have doomed them all. They had no idea that in the darkness between galaxies, vast shapes were moving steadily closer, drawn by the energy signatures of 1,000 thriving worlds on Earth. President Bennett received the final report from the Colonial Evacuation Program. Every human settlement beyond the solar system had been abandoned or converted into hidden military bases. Millions of people had given up their homes and dreams of expansion to return to an overcrowded Earth that barely resembled the world their grandparents had known. "It's done," she told Dr. Cross during their evening briefing. "Humanity is as ready as we can make it. Now we wait and hope our calculations were wrong." Dr. Cross looked at the data streaming in from the deep space sensors, showing the faint but growing signs of something vast approaching from the cosmic void. "I wish they were wrong too, Madam President, but the math doesn't lie. They're coming. And when they arrive, we'll be the only ones ready to fight them." Outside the underground command center, the transformed Earth continued its preparations. In hidden factories, workers built weapons that had never existed before. In training facilities, soldiers learned to fight enemies that existed partially outside reality. And in the deep spaces between the stars, automated sensors watched and waited for the first signs of the darkness that would soon engulf the galaxy. The first sign of the invasion came from the Andromeda colonies, 3 peaceful worlds on the outer edge of known space. The colonies had been home to 2 million Zilani farmers and artists who grew beautiful crystals and created music that could be heard across star systems. On a Tuesday morning, their transmissions simply stopped. At first, the Galactic Council thought it was just a communication problem. Technical failures happen sometimes, especially on distant worlds. But when rescue ships arrived at the Andromeda system 3 days later, they found something that would haunt the galaxy forever. The stars were still there, but they were cold and dark, like someone had blown out candles. The planets floated in space like frozen rocks, their surfaces covered with a thin layer of frost that reflected no light. There were no cities, no people, no signs that millions of beings had ever lived there. Even the emergency beacons that every colony was required to have were gone, as if they had never existed. Captain Derek Walsh of the exploration ship Harmony was part of the second rescue fleet, sent to investigate. He was a Soran officer who had served in the Galactic Patrol for 30 years and thought he had seen everything the universe could show him. He was wrong. "Captain, the sensors aren't picking up any life signs," reported his science officer, a young Etherean named Limkus. "But that's impossible. 2 million people can't just disappear." Derek studied the readings on his screen, but they made no sense. The planets were there. The moons were in their proper orbits, even the artificial. Satellites were still floating in space, but there was no energy anywhere, no heat, no electricity, no biological activity. It was as if death itself had visited these worlds and taken everything that had ever been alive. "Take us closer to Andromeda Prime," Derek ordered. "Maybe the colonists are hiding in underground shelters." As the Harmony approached the largest planet, Derek saw something that made his blood run cold. Vast shapes moved through space between the worlds, darker than the emptiness around them. They looked like living shadows the size of moons, drifting slowly through the dead system with a terrible purpose. "Captain," whispered his communications officer, "I'm picking up some kind of signal from those things. It's not like any language I've ever heard." The bridge speakers filled with a sound like wind through empty caves, mixed with something that might have been singing if songs could be made of pure darkness. The crew members who heard it felt a deep cold settle into their bones, as if something was trying to drain the warmth from their bodies. "Get us out of here now," Derek shouted. But it was too late. One of the shadow creatures had noticed their ship. It moved toward them with impossible speed, growing larger and larger until it filled their view screen like a wall of living night. Derek felt the ship's power systems begin to fail, as the creatures somehow drained energy directly from their engines. "Emergency jump," he ordered, but the navigation systems were already going dark. The Harmony barely escaped, its crew unconscious and its hull covered with a strange frost that took hours to melt away. When Derek's report reached the Galactic Council, it caused panic like nothing in recorded history. More colonies began to go silent. The pattern was always the same: normal communications one day, then nothing. Rescue ships would find dead systems with cold stars and empty worlds, patrolled by creatures that seemed to be made of the darkness between stars. On the Council station, emergency sessions ran day and night. Ambassador Kethvar stood before the assembled delegates, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine fear. "We're dealing with something beyond our understanding," he admitted. "These entities, whatever they are, don't just destroy civilizations. They erase them completely, as if they never existed at all." Counselor Primdex's crystal voice trembled as he spoke. "Our greatest scientists have studied Captain Walsh's data. The creatures appear to feed on all forms of energy, stellar radiation, electrical power, even the life force of living beings. They leave nothing behind." The Hive Queen Zixnath clicked her mandibles nervously. "My scouts report the same creatures approaching the Kithra breeding worlds. We have prepared our defenses, but our weapons seem useless against them." Commander Thexgol hissed in frustration. "How do you fight an enemy that absorbs everything? You throw at it, our plasma cannons only make them stronger. Our shield generators fail the moment they come near." As the debate continued, a junior aide approached Ambassador Kethvar with an urgent message. The aide's hands were shaking as he handed over a data pad. "Sir," the aide whispered, "someone has been trying to contact us from the human territories. They say they have information about the creatures." The entire council chamber fell silent. After 30 years of isolation, humanity was trying to make contact again. The irony was not lost on anyone present. "Put them through," Kethvar ordered. Though his pride made the words difficult to say, the main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar bridge of a human warship. But this was not the simple vessel that had visited them decades ago. The Defender was a massive ship covered in weapons and armor that looked like nothing else in the galaxy. Captain Lucy Stone appeared on screen, older now but with eyes that burned with determination. "Galactic Council," she said in a calm, professional voice. "We have been monitoring your emergency transmissions. We know about the Void Spawn attacks." "The Void Spawn?" asked Counselor Primdex. "You know what these creatures are. We warned you about them 50 years ago," Captain Stone replied. "Dr. Parker's research predicted their arrival almost exactly. We tried to share our defensive plans with you, but you weren't interested in listening to primitive humans." The silence in the council chamber was deafening. Every delegate remembered the human warnings that they had dismissed as paranoid fantasies. "You knew this would happen?" Kethvar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We knew it was possible," Captain Stone answered. "That's why we spent the last 30 years preparing. Earth's defenses are ready, and our weapons are designed specifically to fight dark energy entities." "Then help us," pleaded the Hive Queen. "Our worlds are dying. Entire species are being wiped out. If you have weapons that can stop these creatures, please share them with us." Captain Stone was quiet for a long moment, studying the desperate faces of the beings who had once mocked humanity's fears. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of decades of rejection and isolation. "I'm sorry, but Earth's borders remain closed. Any ship that approaches our territory will be destroyed without warning. We offered to help you once, and you laughed at us. You called us paranoid warmongers and said we had no place among civilized species. But people are dying," Kethvar said desperately. "Billions of innocent lives are at stake." "Yes," Captain Stone agreed sadly, "and we're truly sorry for that. But humanity learned long ago that we can only count on ourselves. We tried to save you once by sharing our knowledge. You rejected our help and our warnings. Now we have to focus on protecting our own people." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Outside the station, the galaxy continued to die as the void spawn spread from system to system, consuming everything in their path. 3 months later, Captain Derek Walsh found himself commanding one of the last operational ships in the Galactic fleet. Most of the other vessels had been destroyed or abandoned. As the void spawn swept through the core systems, he had received orders to attempt one final diplomatic mission to Earth, carrying representatives from every surviving species. As his ship approached the edge of human space, Derek saw something that took his breath away. The entire solar system had been transformed into a fortress beyond imagination. Massive structures orbited every planet, connected by streams of energy that made space itself shimmer like water. Thousands of human ships moved in perfect formations, their hulls gleaming with technologies that seemed almost magical. When the Harmony requested permission to approach Earth, it was met by the Defender itself. Captain Stone's image appeared on Derek's screen once again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood other human officers, their faces hard with the determination of a species that had been forced to stand alone against the darkness. "Captain Walsh," she said, recognizing him from his previous reports, "I remember you. You were one of the first to see the void spawn and survive. What brings you to our territory?" Derek swallowed his pride and spoke the words that no galactic civilization had ever thought they would need to say. "Captain Stone, on behalf of all surviving species in this galaxy, I formally request humanity's help. We were wrong to dismiss your warnings. We were wrong to reject your offer of alliance. If you don't help us, everyone will die." The galaxy was dying faster than anyone had imagined possible. What had started as isolated attacks on outer colonies had become a wave of destruction that swept through the most populated systems like a plague of darkness. The void spawn moved with terrible purpose, not randomly destroying, but systematically erasing entire civilizations from existence on Earth. Dr. Lisa Parker stood in the war room deep beneath the planet's surface, now elderly but still sharp. Her hair was white and her face was lined with years of worry, but her eyes remained bright as she studied the incoming reports. Next to her, President Kevin Ross watched the holographic display that showed the galaxy in real time. Red zones marked where the void spawn had already struck, and the red was spreading like blood through water. "How many worlds have we lost contact with?" President Ross asked quietly. 2,437. Dr. Parker answered, her voice heavy with sadness. "That's roughly 8 billion lives, maybe more. The creatures don't just kill people, they erase all evidence that those people ever existed." The display showed the true horror of what the void spawn did. When they finished with the system, there were no ruins left behind, no graves, no monuments to remember the dead. The planets remained cold and empty, but every trace of the civilizations that had lived there was gone, as if they had never been. President Ross clenched his fists as he watched another system turn. Red on the display, and the Galactic Council still wants us to open our borders and help them. "Captain Walsh's ship is still waiting at the edge of our territory," Dr. Parker replied. "He's been there for 3 weeks, sending the same message every day. They're begging us to reconsider." "Let them beg," said a new voice from the doorway. Admiral Tom Bradley entered the room, his uniform bearing the marks of humanity's new military. He was younger than the others, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had trained his entire life for this moment. "They had 50 years to listen to our warnings. Instead, they called us paranoid and primitive. Now they want our help after their own weapons proved useless." The reports coming in from the galaxy's remaining forces were indeed grim. The combined fleets of dozens of species had engaged the void spawn near the galactic core, and the result had been a massacre. Energy weapons passed through the creatures harmlessly. Kinetic projectiles were absorbed and seemed to make them stronger. Even nuclear weapons only provided more energy for the entities to consume. "Show me the battle footage from the Zolani fleet," President Ross ordered. The holographic display shifted to show the space battle that had taken place near the ancient world of Kepler Prime. 300 Zolani warships, the pride of their civilization, had formed a defensive line against a group of 12 void spawn. The aliens' weapons lit up space with brilliant beams of energy, but every shot that hit the dark creatures simply vanished, absorbed into their shadowy forms. Within minutes, The void spawn had drained the power from entire ships, leaving them floating dead in space. The crews didn't even have time to escape in life pods before the creatures consumed the life energy from their bodies. By the end of the battle, 12 dark entities had destroyed 300 ships without taking any damage themselves. It's the same story everywhere, Admiral Bradley said grimly. The Sorens lost their entire home fleet. The Etherians tried to fight them with pure energy beings, but the void spawn just absorbed them completely. Even the Kithra's hive mind tactics failed because the creatures can drain psychic energy as easily as electrical power. Dr. Parker pulled up another report, this one from their deep space monitoring stations. The largest concentration of void spawn is approaching the galactic core. Our sensors count at least 50 of them, each one the size of a small moon. If they reach the core systems, they'll consume the energy from 100 billion stars. President Ross was quiet for a long moment, staring at the display. Finally, he turned to Admiral Bradley. Are our forces ready? 3,000 ships, all equipped with soul weapons and quantum armor. Every crew member has been trained specifically to fight dark energy entities. We've been preparing for this moment for 30 years, and you believe we can actually win? Admiral Bradley's expression was serious but determined. Sir, we're the only species in the galaxy that understands what we're fighting. Our weapons work because they carry human consciousness, something the void spawn have never encountered before. We don't just have better technology. We have something they can't absorb or deflect: human will and determination. President Ross made his decision. Give the order. Launch Operation Starlight. Within hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled began moving toward the galactic core. Captain Lucy Stone led the formation aboard the Defender, but she was no longer alone. Behind her flew ships with names like Guardian, Protector, and Vengeance, each one bristling with weapons that existed nowhere else in the universe. The soul weapons were humanity's greatest achievement, born from Dr. Cross's research decades earlier. Each weapon contained a fragment of human consciousness, bound to dark matter particles through technology that seemed almost magical. When fired, these weapons carried the focused will of their human operators, striking at the void spawn with something they could neither absorb nor understand. As the human fleet approached the battle zone, they found the remnants of the galaxy's combined forces. Thousands of alien ships floated dead in space, their hulls covered with the same strange frost that marked a void spawn attack. The creatures themselves moved through the debris like living shadows, growing larger as they fed on the remaining energy from the destroyed vessels. All ships, this is Captain Stone. Lucy's voice echoed through the communication systems of every human vessel. Remember your training. These creatures feed on energy, but they can't feed on human spirit. Trust your instincts, not your instruments. Fire where you feel they will be, not where your computers say they are. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human weapons tore through space with streams of dark energy that pulsed with consciousness itself. When the soul weapons struck the void spawn, the creatures recoiled as if they had been burned. For the first time since the invasion began, the dark entities showed signs of actual damage. Captain Roy Baker commanded a squadron of smaller ships that darted between the massive void spawn. Like insects attacking giants, his weapons officer, Lieutenant Sam Green, fired shot after shot of soul-infused ammunition, each one guided by human intuition rather than targeting computers. Target the core areas where they seem most solid, Baker ordered his squadron. Dr. Nash's research says that's where their consciousness is most concentrated. The human ships moved with fluid grace, their crews working together with an efficiency that came from years of training for this exact moment. They didn't rely on rigid battle formations like other species. Instead, they adapted constantly, each captain making split-second decisions based on instinct and experience. Dr. Helen Nash, now serving as the fleet's science officer, monitored the battle from the Defender's bridge. Her instruments showed something that filled her with hope. The void spawn were actually retreating. The dark creatures that had seemed unstoppable against every other species were pulling back from human assault. Captain Stone, she reported excitedly, the soul weapons are working better than we hoped. The void spawn can't absorb the consciousness energy we're firing at them. It's actually causing them pain. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 12 void spawn had been completely destroyed, their forms dissolving into harmless particles that scattered through space. The remaining creatures had fled back toward the empty spaces between galaxies, driven away by weapons they could not understand or counter. As the human fleet regrouped, Captain Stone received transmissions from across the galaxy. Alien species that had survived the initial attacks were reporting that the void spawn in their territories were also retreating. The creatures seemed to be communicating with each other, sharing the knowledge that something in this galaxy could actually hurt them. Admiral Bradley. Captain Stone reported back to Earth. The immediate threat has been neutralized. The void spawn are pulling back to the galactic edge, but we need to hunt down every last one of them before they can regroup and adapt to our weapons. Over the following months, human strike teams spread across the galaxy, tracking down isolated groups of void spawn with methodical precision. Captain Baker became famous for his ability to sense the creatures, even when they tried to hide in the dark matter between stars. Dr. Nash developed increasingly sophisticated detection methods, always staying one step ahead of the entities' attempts to evolve new defenses. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity systematically eliminated a threat that had brought every other species to the brink of extinction. The same humans who had been dismissed as primitive warmongers were proving to be the galaxy's only hope for survival. On distant worlds, alien survivors huddled in underground shelters, listening to reports of human victories. Children who had never seen sunlight because their stars had been drained by the void spawn began to hope that the lights might return to their skies. The final battle took place in the void between galaxies, where the last group of void spawn had. The galaxy that existed after the void spawn invasion was nothing like the one that had come before, where once there had been thousands of thriving worlds filled with billions of beings. Now there were mostly empty systems with cold planets, orbiting dead stars. The survivors huddled together on the few remaining habitable worlds, sharing resources and trying to rebuild civilizations that had been nearly wiped from existence. The old Galactic Council was gone, dissolved when most of its members were consumed by the dark entities. In its place, a new organization called the Interstellar Assembly had formed, but it was a much smaller and humbler group than the proud council that had once ruled the galaxy. The Assembly's first meeting was held on a space station orbiting the neutral world of Haven, one of the few planets that had escaped the void spawn attacks. Representatives from every surviving species gathered in a simple chamber, very different from the grand halls where the old council had met. There were no floating lights or impossible architecture. Here, just basic metal walls and simple chairs, arranged in a circle. Ambassador Ray Martinez represented humanity at this historic gathering. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a patient manner, chosen specifically because he could speak to the other species without the anger or bitterness that many humans felt after decades of rejection. The other delegates looked very different from their predecessors. These were not the proud, arrogant leaders who had dismissed humanity's warnings 50 years earlier. These were the survivors, beings who had watched their entire civilizations nearly die and had learned the hard lesson of humility. Counselor Primdex was still alive, one of the few original council members to survive the invasion. His crystal voice was quieter now, lacking the condescending tone he had once used when speaking to humans. When he stood to address the assembly, his words carried the weight of terrible experience. Fellow beings, he began, his voice trembling slightly, we gather here not as the rulers of a great galactic civilization, but as the remnants of species that nearly went extinct because of our own pride and foolishness. The chamber was completely silent as he continued. 50 years ago, the humans came to us with a warning about the creatures they called void spawn. They offered to share their research, their defensive plans, and their technology. They asked for nothing in return except that we take their warning seriously. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, remembering how they had treated the human warnings. Instead of listening, we mocked them. We called them paranoid warmongers. We said they were too primitive to understand the peaceful nature of galactic civilization. We were wrong about everything. Primdex gestured toward Ambassador Martinez. Every being in this room owes their life to humanity's foresight and sacrifice. While we continued our comfortable lives, dismissing their concerns, they spent 30 years preparing for a threat we refused to acknowledge. When that threat finally came, they were the only ones ready to fight it. The Soren representative, Commander Vexthol, spoke next. She was much younger than the delegates who had served on the old council, part of a new generation that had grown up during the dark years of the invasion. My people lost 90% of our population to the void spawn, she said, her voice filled with sadness. Our home world is a frozen wasteland where nothing grows. We survive only because human ships arrived in time to drive the creatures away. From our last remaining colony, similar stories came from every delegate. The proud Solani had been reduced to a few thousand survivors living on borrowed ships. The vast Kithara hive mind had been shattered, its queens scattered across refugee camps on distant worlds. Species that had once commanded star-spanning empires now struggled to maintain single settlements. Through it all, humanity had remained isolated behind their impenetrable defenses, helping no one but asking for nothing in return. Their ships patrolled the empty spaces between stars, hunting down any remaining void spawn. But they maintained strict borders that no other species was allowed to cross. We have come together today, Primdex continued, to formally acknowledge what we should have recognized 50 years ago. Humanity is not just our equal among the stars. They are our superiors in every way that matters. They saw a threat we could not see, prepared for a war we refused to believe would come, and ultimately saved us from total extinction. Ambassador Martinez had remained quiet throughout the speeches, listening with the patience that had made him respected even by species that had once hated humans. When the other delegates finally turned to him, waiting to hear humanity's response, he stood slowly and looked around the circle of survivors. "Thank you for your words," he said simply. "But I'm not here to accept your apologies or to gloat about humanity's success. I'm here to deliver a message from President Kevin Ross and the people of Earth." The chamber grew even quieter, if that was possible. Everyone knew that humanity's decision about their future relationship with the galaxy would determine whether civilization could ever truly recover from the void spawn invasion. 50 years ago, we came to your council asking to join galactic civilization, Martinez continued. We were young and hopeful, believing that all intelligent species could work together for the common good. You rejected us, not once but 3 times, because you saw us as too aggressive and too primitive. Some of the delegates looked down at their hands, unable to meet his eyes. In the years that followed, we learned something important about ourselves and about the universe. We discovered that being called aggressive and primitive wasn't necessarily an insult. The universe is a dangerous place, and sometimes survival requires qualities that peaceful civilizations prefer to forget they need. Martinez paused, choosing his words carefully. Humanity has decided that we will remain isolated, not because we're angry with you, but because we've learned that we have a responsibility that other species cannot share. What kind of responsibility? Asked the Etherean delegate, speaking for the first time. The responsibility of watching for threats that others cannot see, Martinez replied. The void spawn were not the first danger to threaten this galaxy, and they will not be the last. Humanity has developed abilities and technologies that allow us to detect and fight enemies that exist beyond normal space and time. We've become something that even we don't fully understand. He gestured toward the viewing port, where the stars shone with their renewed light. Every species in this galaxy sleeps safely tonight because human ships are patrolling the darkness, watching for signs of new threats. But our presence among you would be dangerous. We've changed too much, become too different from the beings we once were. The delegates listened with growing understanding. Humanity wasn't rejecting them out of spite. They were protecting them from the very qualities that made humans such effective defenders. Therefore, Martinez announced, by unanimous decision of the Terran government and people, the Sol system will remain permanently closed to all non-human traffic. This decision has been incorporated into our planetary constitution and cannot be changed by any future government. Counselor Prindex spoke the words that everyone was thinking. You're condemning yourselves to eternal isolation to protect us. Yes, Martinez said simply, it's what we do. The Terran Exclusion Protocol was signed that day by every surviving species in the galaxy. Earth's solar system became forbidden territory, surrounded by automated warning beacons that would destroy any ship that approached within 50 light years. The protocol was more than just a law. It became a sacred trust that future generations would maintain no matter what happened. But humanity's protection didn't end with their isolation. Throughout the galaxy, hidden monitoring stations staffed by human volunteers kept watch for new threats. These men and women accepted permanent exile from Earth, spending their lives in secret bases where they scanned deep space for dangers that other species couldn't detect. Dr. Alan Cross, now the oldest living human at 112 years old, made the final entry in humanity's official galactic contact records. His hands shook slightly as he spoke into the recording device, but his voice was strong and clear. Today marks the end of humanity's attempt to join galactic civilization, he said. We tried for 50 years to find our place among the stars as equals with other intelligent species. Instead, we discovered that our place is as guardians, watching from the shadows to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He paused, looking out through the reinforced window of his underground laboratory at the construction cranes that continued to build Earth's defenses. We are no longer the hopeful explorers who first reached for the stars. We have become something else, something necessary but dangerous. Future generations will call us many things: saviors, monsters, or perhaps just the lonely watchers who kept the darkness at bay. But whatever they call us, they will sleep safely because we chose duty over acceptance, isolation over belonging. That is humanity's gift to the galaxy, and our curse to bear alone. Years later, on a distant world where Zalani children played in gardens that grew again under restored sunlight, a young girl asked her mother about the forbidden yellow star that appeared in their sky each night. Why can't we visit the star where the guardians live? Mama, her mother smiled sadly and